I didn't fall for her looks first. I fell for the way she made me feel understood when no one else did. I didn't expect anything meaningful that afternoon. I was just there to do what I always did: move through the day, finish my work, keep my head down. That was my habit back then. I noticed things, but I rarely let them touch me. Until she walked in. She didn't arrive loudly. No sharp movements, no need to announce herself. It was the calm that caught me first. The way her presence seemed to slow the room without asking permission. She was confident, but not in the way people usually show confidence. It wasn't sharp or demanding. It was gentle, settled. Like she knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone else to confirm it. When she spoke, her voice had a warmth that felt intentional, as if she chose her words carefully because she respected the person listening. When she asked my name, she actually waited for the answer. Her eyes didn't drift. They stayed on mine, steady and kind, and for a brief moment, I felt oddly exposed. Like she could tell I wasn't used to being seen that way. She smiled when I spoke, not politely, but genuinely, the corners of her eyes softening as if my words mattered more than they probably did. I remember thinking how rare that felt. We talked about simple things at first. Nothing personal, nothing deep, but even then, there was a rhythm to the conversation that felt different. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, it wasn't to impress, it was to connect. At one point, she laughed softly, the kind of laugh that didn't rush out but lingered, and I caught myself smiling without realizing why. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was comfort, familiarity, as if my nervous system recognized something safe before my mind could catch up. When she thanked me for helping her, she reached out without hesitation. Just a brief touch, her hand resting lightly against my forearm. It was warm, steady, the kind of touch that didn't demand anything, didn't linger too long, but somehow stayed with me even after she pulled away. I remember the exact sensation. The gentle pressure, the quiet confidence in the way she stood close for just a second longer than necessary. My body reacted before my thoughts did. My shoulders relaxed. My breathing slowed. She stepped back, still smiling, and moved on with her day like nothing unusual had happened. But for me, something had shifted. As I watched her walk away, I noticed the grace in her movements, the ease with which she carried herself. There was a story there. I could feel it. Life experience. Joy. Loss. Strength earned, not borrowed. And what unsettled me most wasn't that I found her beautiful. It was that, in just a few minutes, she had made me feel calm in a way I wasn't used to. Seen without being judged. Comfortable without being claimed. I didn't know her yet. I didn't know what she would come to mean to me. After that first meeting, I told myself not to read into it. People cross paths every day, and most of them fade as quickly as they appear. But she didn't fade. She stayed quietly, consistently, slipping into my routine in a way that felt natural, almost unplanned. We began seeing each other more often. Sometimes it was just a few exchanged words, sometimes longer conversations when the world around us slowed enough to allow it. What surprised me wasn't how easily we talked, but how easily the silence settled between us when we didn't. There was no pressure to fill it, no awkwardness, just a shared calm, like sitting beside someone you've known longer than you actually have. She remembered things, small things, a comment I'd made in passing, a detail I'd forgotten I'd even shared. The way she would bring them up, gently, casually, made me realize she listened with intention, not to respond but to understand. That alone made me feel different around her, more present, more honest. Sometimes she'd encourage me in ways that didn't feel like advice. She never told me what I should do. Instead, she'd say things like, "You notice more than you think," or "You're harder on yourself than you deserve to be." Simple words, but they landed softly and stayed. I found myself thinking about them long after we'd parted ways. There were moments when we sat close without acknowledging it, our shoulders nearly touching, the warmth of her presence noticeable even without contact. I'd become aware of how she crossed her legs, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she listened, not in a way that felt intrusive but attentive, almost reverent, as if I was learning the quiet language of her presence. One afternoon, She shared something small but personal. Not a confession, just a glimpse. A pause before she spoke. A breath she took as if weighing whether to let me see that side of her. When she did, her voice softened, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability beneath her composure. Struck me then. She wasn't just kind. She was brave enough to be real. I wanted to respond perfectly. I didn't. I just listened. And when I nodded, when I met her eyes and didn't rush her words, I saw something shift in her expression. A quiet relief, as if she hadn't expected to be held in that space so gently. Later, when she laughed at something I said, really laughed, I felt it echo inside me. It lingered long after the sound faded, long after she walked away. I realized I was starting to look forward to seeing her, not because of how she made me feel about her, but how she made me feel about myself. It happened on a day that already felt heavier than usual. I remember that much. I was carrying doubts I hadn't named yet, about where I was going, about whether I was falling behind everyone else my age. Normally, I kept those thoughts locked away, careful not to burden anyone with them. But with her, the quiet made it harder to hide. We were sitting close, closer than before, in a space that felt removed from the rush of everything else. The light was softer there, muted, as if the world had decided to lower its voice. She noticed my silence before I mentioned it. She always did. "You seem far away," she said gently, not accusing, just observant. Something about her tone loosened me. I spoke without planning to, my words uneven at first, then steadier as they found their way out. I told her about the pressure I felt, the constant sense that I was supposed to be more certain, more accomplished, more confident than I was. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't ask for reassurance. I just let the truth sit between us. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to fix anything. She leaned in slightly, her attention fully on me, her expression calm but deeply present. When I finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Not awkward, but full, as if she was choosing her response with care. Then she reached for my hand. It was slow enough that I saw it happen, gentle enough that I could have pulled away if I wanted to. Her fingers rested over mine, warm and steady, her touch firm but kind. The sensation surprised me, not because it was intense, but because it felt grounding, like being anchored after drifting for too long. I felt it immediately in my chest. My breathing slowed. The tension I hadn't realized I was holding eased its grip. Her hand wasn't demanding anything. It wasn't possessive. It was simply there, offering quiet support without words. She squeezed my hand once, lightly. "You don't have to have it all figured out," she said. "You're allowed to be where you are." I looked at her then, really looked. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The closeness felt different now, charged, but restrained. I became aware of how near her knee was to mine, of the faint scent she carried, of the warmth radiating from her side. Something shifted inside me. This wasn't just comfort anymore. It was awareness. I noticed the fine lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, not as flaws, but as evidence of a life fully lived. I noticed the steadiness in her gaze, the way she held eye contact without challenge or expectation. And suddenly, the age difference that had once felt abstract became real, not as a wall but as contrast. Her calm beside my restlessness, her certainty beside my questions. The thought scared me. I gently withdrew my hand first, curling my fingers into my lap as if grounding myself again. She didn't protest. She didn't look hurt. She simply nodded, as if she understood the hesitation before I did. But even after the space returned between us, the feeling didn't leave. Her touch lingered, not on my skin, but somewhere deeper. And as we parted ways later that day, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit out loud yet. After that day, I changed without meaning to. Or maybe I changed because I meant to, even if I didn't admit it. I told myself I needed distance, space to think, to quiet the thoughts that had begun to surface whenever I wasn't busy. It felt safer to pull back than to risk stepping into something I didn't fully understand. So I did what I always did when things started to matter too much. I retreated. My replies became shorter. I found reasons to leave earlier, to arrive later. Moments that once felt natural now felt loaded, as if every shared glance carried a question I wasn't ready to answer. I thought the distance would ease the tension. Instead, it made me more aware of it. She noticed. Of course she did. The next time we found ourselves in the same space, the air between us felt heavier than before. Not hostile, just aware. There was a careful politeness now, an effort on both sides that hadn't been there before. We stood farther apart. Our conversations stayed on the surface. But beneath it, something unspoken pressed gently, insistently, against both of us. When she finally spoke about it, she didn't corner me. She didn't accuse. She waited until we were alone, until the noise of the world had softened enough for honesty. "You've been a little distant," she said, her voice calm but not detached. "I just wanted to check in." There was no judgment in her eyes, just curiosity, concern. I swallowed, unsure how to explain something I barely understood myself. I admitted that I was confused, that I didn't want to misread things, or worse, cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. I spoke carefully, afraid that one wrong word might undo everything. She listened the way she always did, fully. When I finished, she took a breath, as if steadying herself. "I'm afraid too," she said quietly. That surprised me. I hadn't considered that she might be standing in the same uncertainty. She spoke about expectations, about how easily kindness could be misunderstood, how quickly people judged what they didn't take time to understand. There was a softness in her voice, but also a strength. She wasn't apologizing for who she was. She was protecting it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt fragile, like glass. I looked at her hands then, how they rested loosely in her lap, relaxed but ready, as if she was used to holding both responsibility and restraint. I realized how much I respected her in that moment, not just as someone I cared about, but as someone who knew her boundaries and honored them. "I don't want to lose this," I said finally. The words came out before I could stop them. Her gaze met mine, steady and searching. "Neither do I." We didn't move closer. We didn't touch. But the honesty itself felt intimate, like standing at the edge of something vast and choosing not to turn away, even if we weren't ready to step forward yet. When we parted that day, the distance between us was still there. But it was different now. It wasn't avoidance. It was consideration. Two people standing carefully with something that mattered. And as I walked away, I realized that hesitation wasn't the absence of feeling. We didn't rush back into ease after that conversation. If anything, we moved more carefully than before. But there was a difference now. An honesty beneath every interaction. A shared awareness that neither of us was pretending anymore. The distance between us wasn't gone, but it had softened, like space held with intention instead of fear. It was late when we finally found ourselves alone again, the day winding down around us. The lighting was warm and low, the kind that blurred sharp edges and made everything feel quieter than usual. We sat near each other, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her leg beside mine, close enough that moving away would have felt like a decision rather than a reflex. She spoke first, her voice lower than usual, thoughtful. She talked about how loneliness didn't always look like isolation, how sometimes it appeared in full rooms, hidden behind responsibility and strength. She admitted she'd grown used to being the steady one, the one who listened, the one others leaned on. Saying it out loud seemed to cost her something. As she spoke, her hands rested loosely in her lap. I noticed the way her fingers twisted together briefly before she stilled them. A small sign of vulnerability she might not have realized she was showing. Without thinking too much, I shifted closer. Not touching yet, just reducing the space between us. She didn't pull away. "I don't think I ever told you this," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "But being around you makes things feel less heavy." She turned toward me then, really turned, her expression soft but searching. For a moment, it felt like she was deciding something. Then she leaned in and rested her head gently against my shoulder. The contact was simple, almost innocent, but it sent a slow wave of warmth through me. I could feel the weight of her trust in that small gesture, the way her breath evened out as if she'd finally allowed herself to rest. I stayed still, letting the moment exist without trying to define it. After a while, I lifted my arm carefully and let my hand rest at her upper back. Not holding, not pulling her closer, just present. The fabric beneath my palm was warm. Familiar. She sighed softly, the sound barely there, but it told me everything. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We didn't need to. The closeness said enough. In that quiet, I understood something clearly for the first time. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was connection. Real, mutual, and chosen. Eventually, she lifted her head and met my eyes. There was a tenderness there that made my chest tighten. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not for the touch, for the understanding." I nodded, unsure if words would do the moment justice. What mattered was that we had both stepped forward, just enough without rushing or retreating. When we parted that night, nothing was resolved in the way stories often promise. But something essential had settled between us. We had chosen vulnerability over distance, presence over fear. Even after that night, doubt didn't disappear. It softened, but it lingered, quiet and persistent, like a question that waited patiently for an answer. I felt it in moments when I imagined the future, when I wondered how something that felt so natural between us could still feel so complicated on the outside. I wasn't the only one carrying that weight. I could see it in her too, subtle signs I'd learned to notice. The way she sometimes paused before stepping closer. The careful way she chose her words, as if balancing honesty with restraint. We were standing on solid ground, but the edge was never far away. The moment everything came to a head wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no sudden confession. Just a quiet evening and a shared exhaustion from holding back. We were facing each other, closer than usual, the space between us barely there. The room felt still, like it was waiting. I could hear my own breathing, feel my pulse in my chest. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "We've been careful," she said softly. "Maybe too careful." I didn't interrupt. I'd learned better than that. She took a small step closer. I could feel her warmth now, unmistakable. "I don't regret this," she continued. "But I need to know. Are you here because you want to be, or because you're afraid to walk away?" The question landed gently, but it went straight through me. I realized then that my fear hadn't been about judgment or timing. It had been about responsibility. About choosing something real instead of hiding behind uncertainty. "I'm here because I want to be," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. I just didn't know if wanting was enough. She lifted her hand slowly, giving me time to pull back if I needed to. When I didn't, her fingers brushed my cheek, her palm warm against my skin. The touch was intimate without being rushed, deliberate without pressure. Her thumb moved slightly, a soft, reassuring motion that made my chest tighten. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "wanting is where truth begins." I leaned into her hand without thinking. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. The warmth of her skin, the steadiness in her touch, the way her eyes searched mine not for permission, but for understanding. She leaned in then and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't uncertain. It was intentional, full of meaning, and when she pulled back, her forehead rested lightly against mine. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the feeling settle. There was no rush of urgency, just clarity. The kind that arrives when something finally makes sense. In that quiet closeness, I understood something deeply. Love didn't always come with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it came with a calm acceptance, a shared breath, a choice made without needing to be announced. When we finally stepped apart, nothing felt unresolved anymore. The doubts hadn't vanished, but they no longer ruled us. We had faced them together, and chosen not to let them decide for us. Time didn't rush us after that. If anything, it settled around us gently, like it understood what we were building needed space to breathe. The uncertainty that once hovered between us no longer felt sharp. It softened into something manageable, something we acknowledged without letting it overshadow what we shared. Our connection found its rhythm in the ordinary moments, walking side by side without needing to fill the silence. sharing small observations about the world that only made sense to us. There was an ease now, a comfort that felt earned rather than assumed. One evening stands out more clearly than the rest. We were walking slowly, the day fading into dusk, the air cooler than it had been earlier. Our hands brushed once, accidentally, and this time neither of us pulled away. Her fingers lingered, tentative for just a second, before weaving naturally into mine. The sensation was simple but profound. Her hand fit easily in mine, warm and steady. I felt grounded in a way I hadn't before, as if my restless thoughts had finally found somewhere to rest. She glanced at me, a small smile playing at her lips, and in that look was a quiet certainty that eased something deep inside my chest. Later, we sat together in comfortable silence. She leaned against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder, and I became aware of how familiar her presence had become. Not overwhelming, not consuming, just right. I rested my cheek briefly against the top of her head, breathing her in, feeling the calm rhythm of her beside me. We talked then not about the future in big, dramatic terms, but about what we wanted to protect. Honesty, kindness, the space to grow without fear. She spoke with the same quiet confidence that had drawn me in from the beginning, but now there was something else beneath it, trust. I realized how much she had changed me, not by trying to, but simply by being who she was. Her patience had softened my urgency. Her warmth had steadied my doubt. She hadn't rescued me or reshaped me. She had simply walked beside me until I learned how to stand more comfortably in myself. At one point, she turned toward me and brushed her fingers gently along my arm. A familiar touch now, reassuring and affectionate. "I'm glad we didn't rush," she said softly. "So am I," I replied, and I meant it with everything I had. As the night settled in, I understood something with clarity and peace. Love didn't always arrive in the way you expected. Sometimes it came quietly, through kindness that stayed, through patience that held, through a connection that grew stronger because it was never forced. She inspired my heart not with grand promises, but with presence, with the courage to be real, with the grace to let love unfold naturally. And as we sat there together, close, comfortable, unafraid, I knew I hadn't just discovered love. If the story touched something in you, if you've ever felt a quiet connection that changed your heart, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe for more slow burn, heartfelt stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.